there, Alana Corso, managing broker, co-founding partner of Dwell Realtors, coming to you this week to talk about what is a rent back. Thanks for tuning in this week. It's important to understand what a rent back is when you are buying and selling a property, and I'm going to give you all the details about it. So if you're watching this on YouTube, do me a favor and make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you get delivered my weekly vlogs automatically. And if you're connected on social media, make sure you give me a like and a follow on Instagram and Facebook so we can stay in touch. So now diving into what is a rent back. So when you are a seller and you are selling your home and deciding about where to move to next, you often need to sell the house before you can actually purchase your next one if you aren't able to qualify for bridge financing or don't have significant reserves to buy that next house without selling the first one. So for a lot of sellers, that can equal uncertainty about where they're going to go. And so it's highly desirable for them if they can sell their property, close escrow, collect their proceeds so they have the money in the bank so that they can use it to purchase their next home. But then if they can actually stay in their home and not have the inconvenience of moving to somewhere else for the short term, and they can rent back from the new buyer and stay in that property. So how does that work? So with a buyer, when they're offering, to purchase your home, it's negotiable. It's one of those terms that it depends what the seller needs, how long they need. Some sellers may need to stay in the property only for a few days beyond close of escrow to move out. And then some people need as long as they can because they haven't purchased their next home and they don't know where they're going. And the way it works is lenders will only allow buyers to offer up to, the ability to rent back or stay in that home to the seller for 60 days beyond close of escrow, so about 2 months. So it's important to have that time frame in mind and know that for a seller, you can realistically bank on, you have your close of escrow period, which around here can range from anywhere from say 21 to 30 days, depending on what your lender can do. And then you can stay in the property if the buyer is willing to rent it back to you for an additional 60 days. So that can buy you typically, 80 to 90 days in the house while you are looking to acquire and decide where you're moving to for your next property. So one of the questions I get when we're discussing rent backs with buyers and sellers is what is the cost of a rent back and how do we figure that out? So typically a rent back, the cost to the seller is negotiable between the buyer and seller, and a component that you can use to pull a lever to maybe sweeten your offer if you're a buyer or for a seller that's calculating all of their costs and whatnot. Knowing what that cost is going to be is highly attractive. What a lot of buyers will offer to the sellers is what's called a free rent back. So they're allowing the sellers to stay into the home beyond, for that period, say up to 60 days, and they're not going to charge the seller. And that, there is a cost to the buyer for that. They've started their new mortgage payment. Maybe they're paying, rent or a lease somewhere else. And so they have a cost. And so it's a way that they can sweeten their offer to sellers and say, hey, we're going to give you the courtesy of letting you stay in the house and we're going to do it for free. So there's, the intrinsic value when I'm navigating leases or navigating these contracts and negotiation, we'll put a value and assign it to that and say, well, maybe they offered you $1 million for the house and they've offered you to stay in the house for 2 months for free and your mortgage payment is say, $4,000 a month. So you're like, 2 months, that's an $8,000 value. So those are all things that we take into consideration. And on the buyer side, sometimes buyers can't afford to offer the seller a free rent back. And so what is, how do you determine what the cost is for your, what you can charge the seller? And what a lot of buyers will typically do is charge their PITI. So their principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So what their new payment is on their new house they will just charge that to the sellers, or maybe some sort of deviation, or part of that that they come up with that is still attractive to the seller to stay, but also helps them cover some costs as the new buyers. So these are all kind of, interesting and important factors to consider when you are, offering on a property or you're selling a property, to really figure out, how you can get the best situation to work for you. A, if you're a buyer, to get the house, and B, a seller, to give you the confidence that you don't have the stress of moving right away and can look for your next home. If you have any questions, reach out to me at any time. This is something that comes up in most transactions, I would say, unless a house is vacant. So it's important to know your options and discuss them and weigh those carefully. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.